Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I thought that I would share today some of the books that I feel really capture the cozy vibes. I mean, this whole channel is about books that capture the cozy vibes, but this video in particular, I want to share particularly 10 books that I think are perfect for when you want a cozy read that you can sit down and basically read in one day. So when it's a stormy day and you've been locked inside, these are the kind of books you can pick up to take you through the day. I did actually do a autumn cozy books video a few months ago in autumn, funnily enough. And I think I gave 10 book recommendations that I felt were really good for like cozy reads in the autumn. So in this video it's going to be a bit more general, not particularly autumn or wintry books, but just generally cozy books that you could read any time of the year. I'm also not going to include any of the books that I mentioned in that video, even though I would of course recommend them. So if you are looking for more recommendations and particularly like cold feeling cozy books, then definitely watch that video. I'll link it in the description below. So the first book on this list is a absolute classic favourite for me, and that is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. I feel like this story is much more well known for its movie, and the film is great. It's definitely one of my like go-to cozy films as well, but the book is also brilliant. In this story, Wesley, who is a farm boy who is in love with the girl who lives on this farm, Buttercup, ends up leaving his homeland to go and make a fortune so that he can marry Buttercup and they can live a happy life together. However, as he goes on this journey, news travels that he has actually been captured by the dread pirate Roberts. This leaves Prince Humperdinck to ask for Buttercup's hand in marriage instead, thinking that her true love has died at the hands of a pirate. She agrees to marry the Prince Humperdinck. However, this mysterious man in black keeps coming along to thwart this plan, and the whole story is just an absolute brilliant adventure and just it's so good. It's so quick and easy to read. It's such an adventure. I think the book takes a bit more of a serious turn to the story than the film does, and the ending is slightly different as well. So if you love the classic 80s movie and you want to see kind of where that came from, this book is amazing. It's quite different to the film, but kind of captures the same essence. The second book I want to recommend is actually not a fantasy book. I think most of the books on this list are either fantasy or classics, but I wanted to recommend a contemporary book, which I never really do on this channel, and that is Just One Day by Gayle Foreman. This is a whirlwind romance story set in Paris, and it follows a kind of an interesting relationship that happens whilst on a trip to Paris that maybe doesn't go as well as the main character hoped. And when she returns back home, I think to America, to go to college, she is faced with kind of the repercussions and emotional turmoil that relationship has actually caused her. It is kind of cheesy at times, but it also takes a bit more of a serious look at the impact of relationships on people, particularly on young people as well. So yes, I would definitely recommend this one if you're looking for a contemporary romance that's a little bit more serious but still has like the fun of a trip to Paris and starting college. Right, back onto the fantasy. The next book I want to recommend is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is maybe the only book on this list that maybe you wouldn't read in one day, although I definitely think you can, but it's definitely the longest of the books on this list. It's 400 pages, so slightly longer than most of the other ones. I have read this book quite a long time ago now, but whenever I think about it, it definitely brings back all of the, I don't know, I can feel the atmosphere of the book even now, like ages. Oh my gosh, the wind is so loud. I can still kind of feel the atmosphere of the book even now, all these years after reading it, when I think back to it. The story is set in a village where they are surrounded by this wood, and this wood has some kind of malevolent powers within it, and in order to keep the village protected from the powers of this wood, they look to a wizard who they refer to as the dragon to keep them all safe. In exchange for this, the wizard asks for one girl from the village to be sent to him to serve him every 10 years. And this is known as a fate almost worse than the woods itself. At the start of this book, the next choosing is approaching, and everyone is pretty confident that they know which girl is going to be chosen. This person is the main character's best friend. However, when it comes to the day of the choosing, actually, our main character is picked instead. The whole woods and wizard's tower setting is so fairy tale-esque and just really magical and whimsical to read. It's also a standalone book, which is why I included it in this video, because you can read it all in one go and then it comes to a conclusion, which is kind of what I really like to read when I'm going to read one book in a whole day. It's something that I can read from start to finish and feel like I've completed a story. So I definitely recommend this one if you're looking for something and maybe a little bit longer than the other books, but that has that kind of fairy tale feel to it, but for an older. It's definitely not for children. It's definitely got an older audience in mind. The next book on this list is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I actually only read this book for the first time last year. I never read it whilst I was a child, so I'm really glad that I finally read it, because this book is so charming, it's so heartwarming and lovely to read. The story follows Marilla and Matthew Cuthbert, who are brother and sister, and they live on this large plot of land, and they're looking to adopt a orphan boy who can come along and help them on the land now that they're getting into older age. However, there is a mix-up at the orphanage and they're actually sent a girl, Anne. Matthew, when he goes to collect her, ends up taking her back anyway, feeling quite guilty, and she ends up becoming a massive part of their life, and of course they cannot get rid of her. So if you're looking for something to lift your spirits, this is definitely a perfect read. The next book I have here is The Murder on the Orient Express by Agatha Christie, and I wanted to include an Agatha Christie book on this list because her murder mysteries are perfect one day reads for when you're staying at home all day. But I particularly picked Murder on the Orient Express because the setting of it is so enclosed that it kind of gives that sort of I don't know, enclosed, staying indoors kind of feel to it. I don't know if I really need to explain Murder on the Orient Express. Basically, a murder happens on the Orient Express and good old Hercule Poirot is there trying to find out who has done it. That's kind of all you need to know. To be honest, any Agatha Christie book is perfect for a sort of staying indoors day, and they're all around like 200, 300 pages, so you can easily read them in one day. The next book is also a classic and maybe a little bit of a random one to include, but I'll explain why. And that is Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. So this book isn't cozy in the sense that it's heartwarming and lovely. It's definitely not either of those things. If you're looking for something a bit more creepy to read for like that cozy day, then this is a really good one to choose, because it's not all out terrifying, but it definitely is a little bit unsettling and creepy. Dr. Jekyll and Mr Hyde is about a doctor who manages to create this drug, I guess, that if he takes it, he becomes another person, who he calls Mr Hyde. Whilst Dr. Jekyll is all that is good about him, Mr Hyde is all that is bad and evil about him. Yeah, it's definitely like a bit creepy, but I've read this book several times, and I just think it's a really brilliant book. So if you are looking for something really short and something a little bit creepy, then this is a great read. The next book on this list is probably my most recently read book on this list, and that is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. In short, this story follows our main character Richard Mayhew, and whilst he is out with his girlfriend one night, he sees a girl on the street bleeding out, and he goes to help her, and in helping her he ends up becoming entangled in another world called the London Below. He ends up becoming trapped in the London Below, and once you're in the London Below, you can never return to your normal life. This book is just so witty and so quirky, but also very like cozy day reads as well. This next book is for if you want a cozy feel to your fantasy, but you're not like a beginner to fantasy, or you're not really into fairy tale fantasy. You more like, you know, fantasy with magical creatures and wars and battles and things like that, but you still want that kind of cozy day feel to it. So the book I'd recommend for this is Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. The story follows our main character Karu, and Karu lives kind of a double life. In one of her lives, she is a 17-year-old art student in Prague. So yeah, a lot of the story is set in Prague, which is just a really cool setting. I don't think I've read any books in Prague other than this one. And the other life that she's leading, she is an errand girl to this monstrous kind of creature. She doesn't know quite how she came to be raised by this creature or what his intention really is with her. But this character is like a father to her, and she has kind of been raised half in the real world and half in this other world. It's actually a trilogy as well, so if you're looking for a binge like weekend read, then you could binge all three together, and yeah, it's just a brilliant fantasy series. The next book is back to that kind of cozy fairy tale-esque fantasy, and that is Lonely Castle in the Mirror by Mizuki Tsujimura. Lonely Castle in the Mirror follows Kokoro, and she is not having a great time at school. She's been really bullied and treated really poorly, and as a result of this, she doesn't want to go to school, and so she stays at home. And one day, while she's at home on her own, her parents are out, she ends up noticing that her mirror in her bedroom starts to glow. Obviously intrigued, she reaches out to the mirror and ends up transporting her to this castle, hence Castle in the Mirror. While she is there, she is confronted by this little girl with a wolf mask, and this little girl tells her that Kokoro has been invited to be part of this castle with several other children, and they're allowed to be there, I think for the school year anyway. There's cut-off times, they can only be there from like 9 till 5 or 9 till 3 Japanese time. If any of the children in there do break the rules, then they will all be punished and they'll all be eaten by the wolf, who apparently lives in this castle. Whilst they are all there though, they all have the opportunity to go on a hunt to find a special key that's been hidden, and if they find this key called a wishing key, they'll be able to be granted a wish. I thought going into this story that it'd be more about the kind of let's solve some clues and find the key, but it's actually more about the lives of these different children who end up in this castle and just the friendships and relationships that kind of bloom out of their loneliness, out of their shared loneliness. It was just so charming. It kind of brought a tear to my eye in the end, and it's just such a lovely book. So yeah, if you want something that's a bit more meaningful and poignant but with a happy ending, then I would definitely recommend this book. So my final book on this list is again one that I read last year and also read in one sitting. I think I stopped to go to the toilet, but otherwise I could not tear myself away from this book. So this is, perfect for if you just want to be absolutely sucked into a story. And that is Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. It's very hard to describe this book, even though I've tried to do so many times on this channel. But in short, the story follows Piranesi, I don't actually know how you pronounce the name, who is living in a house. However, this house is kind of the whole world. It has different levels, it has weather, it has a sea, an ocean and a tide, all within this house. And for Piranesi, this house is the whole world. And in this house, it is only him and one other person who he refers to as the other, who live there. However, Piranesi begins to suspect that there actually might be somebody else who is now in the house, and he doesn't know whether he can trust them. And so the whole story kind of goes from there. It's such a good mystery. It really keeps you on your toes the whole time. It gives you just enough information constantly being drip fed to you that you feel like you can keep going, but it keeps you as much in the dark as it possibly can until the last minute, which is my favourite kind of mystery thriller kind of book. So yes, would really recommend this one if you want something very quick to read but kind of haunting, and yeah, something that will really stay with you for sure. So those are my 10 recommendations of books to read in one day, or books to read when you're stuck inside and you want something cozy. Please let me know if you have read any of these books already, and also what is your go-to book recommendation for a one sitting read or a cozy day read? I would love to know. I hope that you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you very soon in the next